Hey guys, welcome back to this tutorial series. Today we're going to be talking about regions. Thus far we have talked a lot about engaging with scripts and engaging with units and just messing with the map as a whole. But we haven't really gone into details with how to manipulate players using areas of the map. So for example, if I look at the map as a whole in the editor, maybe if you wanted to, in this area, cause something to move the players, maybe from here to here, or from here to here, or maybe you want a chat message when a player enters a certain region. Well, luckily there's a way to make that happen with these regions right here. So this is the region tool. If you press R or you select it, you can go ahead and create a new region. So what I'm going to do is in the bottom left corner, I'm just going to create a new region, and I'm just going to call it checkpoint. So now every time somebody enters checkpoint, I want to send a chat message that says checkpoint. So we can go ahead and do that in our world scripts because this is a world event. So since it's a world event, what we can do is I'm going to delete this old script from the previous video. I'm going to just put this new script in world events and call it when unit enters a region, because this is specifically a unit entering. And you can see right here, when unit enters a region. Now, with regions, there's a couple things that we have to check. So you're going to be given a couple parameters. You're going to be given the triggering unit and triggering region. If you're given a triggering region, that means there can be multiple. So the first thing you want to do is, for region scripts, just check that you're in the right one. So there's this thing called region comparison. And just go ahead and check that the triggering region is equal to the one that you're talking about, checkpoint. So not quite this entity, but this should be triggering region, right here. So if it was this entity, then it would be one of these entity scripts. But since it's not in an entity, we cannot use this entity. So now we're left with triggering regions equal to checkpoint. If it is, if this is true, now we can proceed and we can set a chat message that says checkpoint. And it's just really important, these if statements, because as you move in the future, it's going to get really hectic if you have every region just doing the same code, because then it's hard to have unique things for unique regions. So it's good to just have one region do one thing, and then you can just hide off that if statement, or you can just hide off that if statement for that checkpoint once you've done it. Right? Changes are saved, and now if we just go play, what happens is when I go somewhere near the bottom left corner into the region where I drew it, it's going to say checkpoint. So I believe it was below this circular thing. So once I enter this area down here, it should tell me that it should say checkpoint. And you can see right here it says checkpoint. And now the good thing about regions is there's also a script that goes with them, which is when a unit exits a region. So we have this one script, but then we also have when a unit exits a region. So this is also a world script. And so region, I'll just type region, unit leaves a region. So now same exact thing as before, we want to make sure that we're in the right region. We're talking about the right one. Because if we're talking about a different region, it's going to get really hectic, as I said. So here we go. If we're in the checkpoint region, then we can send a chat message. Left region. Okay, wait, no checkpoint. And we'll just let that load real quick. Okay, here we go. Save and apply. And now let's go ahead and try it out. So now we're in the play section. So we're in the region at the moment. So that means when I leave, it should run no checkpoint. And you see right there, it says no checkpoint. So now it should say checkpoint when we go in and no checkpoint when we come out. So this is a really helpful tool because it can help you keep track of units in certain areas. So for example, maybe you wanted to figure out whether this is like a shop area and you want to make sure that there's a certain number of players in the shop, or when there's a certain number of players you can do a certain tool. So you can just create a global variable and attach it to the region So every time one player goes inside the region, you can increase that global variable and say, okay, +1. And then when somebody leaves, you just -1. And that's a really safe and easy way to use regions to get a task done. So here's a couple things about regions. You might notice that they're in squares and you can draw a lot of them. You can draw actually as many as you want. One thing I advise against is too many regions in the same area. So if you can avoid doing regions in regions, please do so, because what's going to happen is you're going to have really confusing code and it's going to be hard to edit. So just try not to have too many regions in one area. You can have them spread out though. And then what you want to do is when you're using regions and scripts, make sure you follow the same format where I don't think I've ever showed you guys, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to create another region. I'm going to call it destination. So I'll show you what we're going to do in a second, but we'll just call this region destination. And so let's go into the scripts. And so in the scripts right here, when unit enters a region, send chat message checkpoint to everybody for checkpoint. And otherwise, if the region is equal to destination, so right here, destination, I recommend that you put like your parameters and functions on the left and then your things that you're looking for on the right, just so it's organized, but you don't have to do that. And then I'm just going to copy this chat message over here, and instead of saying checkpoint, it's going to say destination. So now what's going to happen is every time you enter into checkpoint, it's going to say checkpoint. Every time you enter into destination, it's going to say destination. And let's just check that that works. So we go into checkpoint, it says checkpoint, and oh, my keys got stuck. Give me one moment. All right, there we go. And so when I leave, it's going to say no checkpoint. And now let's just go up to destination. And right here, you see that the code says checkpoint. And that might be kind of really confusing because we just talked about how that should not be happening. So now let's take a look at our code. Well, it says if triggering regions checkpoint, then run checkpoint. Otherwise, if triggering regions destination, run destination. So that's code that looks pretty good to me. But if it's looking good and it still doesn't work, try republishing. So yeah, I'm just showing you guys that it's really important to just remember to republish after you see errors that make no sense, because sometimes it's just the game not having updated yet. So now if I just go up to or go down, I'm in destination and you can see it works properly now. So republishing is generally the key to fixing things. And you notice when I left that region, there was no chat message that said no checkpoint, because that's not the right region. So checkpoint and destination are different regions. So what I was doing there is I was just showing you guys how to write if statements for regions, where I write if, otherwise if. So don't do this, because what this is gonna do is it's gonna make laggier code. So even though it's easier to read because you could do this, it's more laggy. So I recommend you do this because it's gonna make your code run faster. Right. And so now you guys know how to make these regions, how to write them in the code. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make some teleportation. So let's say when you enter the checkpoint, we move the player. So there's this move entity script that we've used earlier. And let's just move the triggering unit that went into the region. And let's move them to the center. Let's use a brand new function. Let's use center of region. And let's pick a different region from, usually we always use entire map region. This time let's use destination. So now what's going to happen is whenever a unit enters checkpoint, they're going to be moved to the center of destination. So now let's go ahead and try it out. So right now we're right here. So let's just go into checkpoint and watch the chat very closely. My prediction is that it's going to say checkpoint, no checkpoint, destination, all in one go. And if you just take a look at the chat, checkpoint, no checkpoint, destination. I'm going to write a message in between just to show a break and then do it all over again just to show that that is the order of the messages. So you see checkpoint, no checkpoint, destination. And so what happened is we entered the region checkpoint, and then we instantly left. So you don't have to worry about instant teleportation causing a script to break. And that's what I wanted to show there. Alright, so those are the basics of regions. Now what we're going to do is talk about more advanced regions. So there's two things that we need to understand. So first, let's talk about position and entity bounds. So whenever we have position and entity bounds, let's just say if triggering region is destination, then what we want to do is um, let's talk about entity bounds. So we can talk about entity bounds with a good example would be with bubbles. So right here, let's talk about entity bounds. So let's just say I create a script for all units in, and then you're going to see entity bounds, all units in region. So entity bounds and entity position, these are two things that are present within the region's functions area. So these are regional functions. And you're going to see right here it says entity bounds. So let's talk about this. Bounds of an entity basically says if you have an entity, picture the homie unit in your head and draw a square around it, like the hitbox of it. That is the bounds of this entity. So we can say the bounds of this entity, which would be the projectile. So then for all units in the bounds of this entity, you could for example, move them to a random location. So what this is going to do is, if you have multiple units touching the projectile at the same time, it's going to move all of them rather than just one. So that's an example of how this would be used. And as you can see, if I save and apply, and I just go back to play and I put the bubble, I still teleport the same as we did earlier. The only difference is this time the code decides to check the entity bounds. So it's a little bit expensive to check any entity bounds, but it's worth it because it helps to check specific areas if necessary. For example, for maybe if you create a grenade, you want to see anything touching in its bounds. I want you guys to try that on your own actually and find out that that might not be the best solution because the entity bounds are kind of small. So you might need to find a new solution for the grenade explosions. But yeah, so that's entity bounds. Now let's talk about position. Position is really similar. It's just your coordinates. So let's just talk about for all units in position, we can just say, I don't see position here anywhere, but so basically position is just x and y coordinates. So I'll just show you those on the map. That's an easier way to show you guys. So if you take a look at this top right here, this is going to tell you the x and y coordinates. So I'm just going to hold it still. You see it says x is 666, y is 861. If I move it to the right, x increased a lot, y is kind of the same. If I go up, y decreased, x is kind of the same. And so that's just kind of position. It's just x and y coordinates, and you can think of it as that. And now let's get to the final thing, which is dynamic regions. So now, the thing I talked about with the grenade, if you want a larger radius, you can use dynamic regions. Basically, a dynamic region, you can just think of it as a region that's created on the spot and is deleted after it's done being used. So let's create a dynamic region. So let's say for all units in a region, okay? But let's create a dynamic region. So for all units in this dynamic region. So a dynamic region consists of four parameters: an x coordinate, a y coordinate, a width, and a height. So you might notice x and y, oh, that's position. So you need to give it a starting location and then a width and a height. Now let me just explain really quick how this works, because it's not how you think it would. Or let me explain what I mean by that. So if I create a region, take a look at my position. It's 187, 3854. So if I draw my region from that position, then I'm gonna get my x and y, but then you see my width and height, it doesn't create this region X. It doesn't create this region in the center of the position I drew it at, does it? Instead, what it does is it creates the region here to the right. It doesn't create it right where I put my mouse, but instead it puts it here at sort of an offset area. And that's a little bit confusing to a lot of developers because they might think, oh, if I'm creating this dynamic region at a coordinate x and y, it's creating it at the center. So like this position 189 352. So right here, if I put my mouse here, 187 353, right? That's about where the region is. That's not the center of the region though, that's the top left corner. So when you're dealing with dynamic regions in your scripts, you have to remember that the x and y coordinate you choose, I lost my script. Let's try to find it. I think it was here somewhere. I can't quite remember. I think it was in the bubble. But yeah, so right here. So if I wanted to create a dynamic region, just keep in mind this x and y is the top left corner. And then you branch out a width and a height. And width and height, you guys could experiment in the model editor, see how big or small those are. But yeah, those are basically just dynamic regions. So those are good to use when you want a region on the spot and you don't need it ever again. So yeah, there you go. That's the basics of regions and a little bit more in depth. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I'll see you.